The history of Ysink Reign, also called the Five Kingdoms, is one that is filled with a litany of events. There are three key eras that make up the timeline, which can be found by clicking the link below. In the Archives of Ysink Reign book series by Garrett K. Jones, there was originally going to be an abridged version of this history in the prologue of Book 1, The Heirs of Mennonites. However, that was cut in favor of a more action-packed opening featuring the demise of the eponymous villain. It's important to keep in mind that this timeline is always updating. With each volume in the series, new information is discovered and will be placed accordingly within the scope of events. It would then be important to note that this video will probably not be the ultimate edition. With that said, let us begin. As stated earlier, there are three key eras of history for the Five Kingdoms. First, there's the years before Mennonites, or YBM. There's the Age of Mennonites, or AOM. And finally, the Years of Restoration, abbreviated as YOR. Roughly 5,000 years before Mennonites, dragons were the first sentient species to arrive in the region, which was originally called Ram Da'an Kele. While they mostly roamed the wilds, they did occasionally migrate out of the region to a place that became referred to as the nests. They would go here to mate, lay their eggs, and raise their hatchlings. During this time, the dragons built a variety of monuments throughout Ramdan Kele, including the Citadel of Beleren, which became a massive storehouse of knowledge, and the Monolith of Greco, which is a solid tower of stone in the grasslands of the region. A millennium later, in 4000 YBM, elves arrived in Ram Da'an Kele. They came south out of the region to the north known only as the Frostlands. Like the dragons, they are attuned to magic. And since dragons existed first, the elves immediately recognized the majesty and power of the dragons. Because of this, the elves and dragons forged a powerful alliance that would last until the Age of Mennonites. The elves' love for nature helped them adapt their magic for designing homes and an economy that thrived in tune with nature rather than subjugating the natural world. The elves built a city, Lasigra Dantanati, which still stands throughout the book series. 200 years later, in 3800 YBM, dwarves, which had apparently been thriving in the darkness of underground tunnels beneath the region, emerged from their caverns in the Great Chain, the mountains bordering what is now Maiga and Pasquodal. They are somewhat standoffish at first, but they end up building a tentative yet respectful peace with the elves and dragons. The dwarf clans also used some base forms of elemental magic that they applied to the jewelry, weapons, and armor they forged in their mines. Nearly 1,000 years later, humans migrated to Ram Da'an Kele from Ronso, which lies to the west across the sea. The humans arrive in clans that have been feuding since before their departure, and as many of the clans settle in the central part of the region, they begin to congregate into factions built on resentments from the past, and civil war breaks out for 500 years. When the war ends in 2300 YBM, the remainder of humans living in Ram Da'an Kele build a kingdom for themselves, with a capital city called Chi-Sen. 300 years later, a coalition of the most skilled magic-using dragons, dwarves, and elves founds an academy for training students to become magical guardians of the realm. The students graduated to the rank of mystic and became the counselors and guardians of Ram Da'an Kele. From 1200 to 200 YBM, the mystics arbitrated disputes between the people of Ram Da'an Kele, as well as between the realm and other nations such as Ronso. While some humans showed meager to middling levels of magical prowess, it isn't until 5 centuries later, in 1500 YBM, that humans are finally admitted to the academy. This decision wasn't meant as a repeal of prejudice, but rather because of the 4 sentient races, only humans lack the emotional maturity to interact peacefully. Between 1000 and 900 YBM, a new species is spotted sporadically within the realm. The creatures, called Barvolteers by the dwarves, resembled great beasts that walked like men. They descended from the north in tribes, Some looked like great big bears, others like wolves, and still a third tribe looked like the ancient lions that used to roam the Badlands in the southern part of Ramdan Kelly. The wolf tribe returned to the Frostlands, never to be seen again, and the lion tribe continued further south and established the slaving empire of the Misrani. Only the bear tribe remained in Ramdan Kelly, keeping to the Great Chain and the Sanctuary Forest, a neutral zone established by the mystics after a major dispute in the realm. In the final 150 years of the YBM era, a child is born. His elf father and his human mother gave him a name, but the boy eventually came to be known as Mennonites. He is the first of his kind. The breed is referred to as halflings. Halflings possess the long lifespans and physical aesthetics of the elves, but like humans, they are not as tall. Not much is known about Mennonites during his formative years. There is a lot of speculation as to the kind of person he was before he became the warlord history has described him as. However, it was well documented by the Mystic Academy that Mennonites showed a tremendous talent for magic by the time he was 50 years old, the elf equivalent of an adolescent. It was at this time that Mennonites was offered admittance into the academy to begin his training. But not long into his studies, Mennonites became expelled because of his affinity for the unnatural uses of dark magic. Shortly after his expulsion, Mennonites disappeared for 3 decades. A century old, Mennonites emerged from his self-imposed exile. Where he went and how he spent his time is of great speculation, but when he resurfaced, he came into the employ of the human king, Garvin II. For 35 years he quietly served Garvin's court faithfully, working his way up to the rank of Garvin's chief advisor. However, in 15 years before Mennonites usurped power, a series of precursor events began to shape the region of Ramdan Kelly. Reports of dragon attacks surfaced throughout the kingdom. Despite the fact that neither the elves or dwarves knew anything about the attacks, supposed attacks continued to happen on the outlying villages and human settlements. After a year of such attacks, Garvin sanctioned Mennonites to assemble a team of dragon slayers. Mennonites' team, which included many of his personal acolytes, hunted the dragons to the point of extinction. At the end of the last year prior to his rise to power, Mennonites set a trap in which he lured world leaders from the elves and the dragons and the humans. During the gathering in the Sanctuary Forest, Mennonites assassinated Cormat, the Dragon King, with a dragon's bane arrow. He also had his archers murder Ropine, the king of the elves. In the aftermath of the deaths, Garvin could not believe the evil his chief advisor had displayed, but his disgust was short-lived, as Mennonites murdered him as well and finally took control of Chi-Sen, thus kicking off the century-long Mennonite Wars in the Age of Mennonites. So that is it for this video. Thank you. We hope you have enjoyed watching. If you liked what you saw, please subscribe for upcoming videos. If you would like to learn more about the Archives of the Synchran book series, please follow the link below.